Well, Donald Trump and his administration have hit the brakes on his planned reciprocal tariff plan that briefly went into effect on Wednesday. Now, he announced in a Truth Social post that Trump will be scaling back his proposed tariffs to 10% for a 90-day pause for countries that did not implement retaliatory measures. But he's taken a much different approach when it comes to China. Not only did he not back down on China, he increased the U.S. tariff on China from 104% to 125%. And I think it is safe to say Trump is ready to take on China. He's the one president who is willing to take on China. So we're going to dive into all of this for you today. But we're going to begin with the paused tariffs from Liberation Day. Reading over his statement. So, quote, based on the lack of respect that China has shown to the world markets, I am hereby raising the tariff charged to China by the United States of America to 125% effective immediately. At some point, hopefully in the near future, China will realize the days of ripping the United States off and other countries is no longer sustainable or acceptable. Conversely, and based on the fact that more than 75 countries have called representatives of the United States, including Department of Commerce, Treasury, and the United States Trade Representative, to negotiate a solution to the subjects being discussed relative to trade barriers, tariffs, currency manipulation, and non-monetary tariffs, and that these countries have not, at my strong suggestion, retaliated in any way, shape, or form against the United States, I have authorized a 90-day pause and a substantially lowered reciprocal tariff during this period of 10%, also effective immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter. This is a huge update, and we kind of expected it. We wanted it to happen. We knew there was some mixed messaging coming up from the White House, but this was something that the markets have been very unsettled by. They've been very unsettled by what is the future going to look like. The markets, business owners, small business owners, large business owners, they want consistency. They want predictability. They want to be able to look at the American economy and say, I know what I'm going to be charged for tariffs the next 10 years. I know what my tax rate's going to be. I know what the regulations that are going to be in place. And there was a lot of mixed messaging from the White House. You had the Peter Navarro and the Howard Lutnick wing of the White House, really kind of espousing more of the tariffs are here to stay. Tariffs are a way to generate revenue for the country. While you had the other side, more the Elon Musk and Scott Bessent, that this is a negotiating tool, that the goal should be to get to zero tariffs. And I believe the mixed messaging probably did hurt them a little bit, but ultimately Trump took the right advice from the people around him, made the right decision. This was the right deal to make. You take the victory. You've set it's like you're playing. It's like you're tossing up a softball. You just got to smack it out of the park. Take the victory. Don't swing and a miss right here. You have the ability to take the victory. Take the off ramp. Negotiate these deals because we know that they will negotiate these trade deals, and it's not just going to be about tariffs. It's not going to be about non-tariff barriers or maybe VAT taxes. It's going to also be about U.S. exports to different markets. Obviously, I think American products are going to get introduced into new markets simply because there aren't going to be tariffs. There aren't going to be VAT taxes. You bring down those barriers, there's going to be a demand for American products. But then also kind of artificially negotiating trade deals where you have other countries purchasing our products, our goods, our services. That is going to be huge for the American economy. And like we said, they're going to spend a great deal of time negotiating this trade deal. My only concern that I have kind of going forward on this is what kind of preliminary agreement are we going to be looking to get to in 90 days? Because obviously it's a 90-day pause. Are we just looking to, hey, they're cooperating with us, we're going to continue this? Because I don't think if I were in this position, I don't know if I would have rolled it out this way. I'd have probably done it more of a couple year period where, a tariff will go in 6 months, a year, 2 years, if XYZ doesn't happen. Because typically, these trade agreements take 18 to 24 months to actually come to an agreement on. And then, plus the ratification in the other country, in the United States, that can take a while. So we're just going to have to let this play out. And as of right now, I think it is very safe to say we are willing to give some slack in the line and let the Trump administration run with this, like we have been. We've been willing to let them run with this. But I think there is a certain boundary where you can get outside of that. But my overall take on this is that the underlying idea of these tariffs as leverage, it's good. This is how you can get things done. This is how you get what you want. Use tariffs as leverage. Now, do I think the messaging and how it was rolled out could have been better? Yes, of course. Are there little things I would have tweaked? Of course. Do I think that the mixed messaging from the White House was a bad look and hurt the Trump administration? It probably spent some political capital that they didn't need to spend? Yes, of course. You look at, like I said, the Navarro wing versus kind of the Musk wing. And I think there was a lot of people who took issue with when it came to the calculation of the tariff rate. From what we could tell, it basically seemed like it was the trade deficit that we had divided by the imports that we import from the other country, and that's how that tariff rate was decided. So I think there was a lot of people who were concerned with that, because then the only way, then it's not really about tariffs, it's about trade deficits. And I'm not as concerned about a trade deficit. If there is a trade deficit that's artificially created because our products are being excluded from other markets, not because we're not competitive there, just because we're either being excluded through a tariff, a tax, some other regulations. If there is something that is artificially lower in demand for our product, okay, that's not good, and we need to deal with that. And that will help the trade deficit. But the trade deficit on itself in a vacuum isn't a big deal. We are a bigger economy. Really, are we going to expect that the people of, Madagascar or, Vietnam, that they're just going to buy all this stuff from us? No, we are such a bigger economy than they are. You can't even compare it. Now, can you make that argument when it comes to Canada or Mexico or the EU or China? Yes, 100%. I believe that the larger countries that are larger economies that are similar to our economy, that can be huge. We can get a lot more. They can purchase a lot more products. But when you're looking at a country that's, 2% of the size of the United States, I don't think we should be worried about the trade deficit when it comes to that. And to be honest, the way that this was rolled out, I don't know if the benefits outweighed the risk. I think there was a better way you could have gone about this. You could have gone to each and every country and say, hey, behind the scenes, we want to negotiate a trade deal. You wouldn't have to worry about the markets reacting the way they did. You wouldn't have to worry about any political blowback. And of course, now this is just ammunition for the Democrats that they're going to use against President Trump. If the stock market even goes down 2% due to something completely unrelated, like a healthy correction, they're gonna pin it on Trump. And the only thing that I see, and correct me if I'm wrong or if you see something else, but the only thing that I see that Trump got out of rolling the tariffs out this way is he's showing other countries that he's not afraid to do it, and he will do it. And I think there is some power behind that to be a leader who is not afraid to do it, who is showing that he's not afraid to do what he says he's going to do. If they don't cooperate, this is what we're going to do. He was not afraid to do it. He walked out and he did it. So I think there is some political capital that can be gained from that. But, the risk versus the reward, I don't know if it was there. Like I said, the White House could have called up any other country and said, hey, we want to renegotiate this trade deal. And if you don't, we're going to tariff the hell out of you. We're going to exclude you from our market. We're going to ruin you economically for decades to come. This would have avoided the market reaction in the way it did. And although, like we said, it could have been a good time to put this capital to work. Like, I'm not a financial advisor, and I can't tell you, but typically when there's a correction, that's a better time to buy into the stock market, a broad index fund that owns a large share of American companies like the S&P 500. Typically, that's a good time to put capital to work. But like I said, not a financial advisor, can't give advice. But it's given the Democrats ammunition against Donald Trump. Now they're going to go after him. This whole insider trading thing, which is just absolutely insane. Adam Schiff, the sleazebag from California, is calling for an insider trader investigation into Trump over the tariff pause. How will we investigate the people in Congress who are actually insider trading? Who we've known for decades that this is what they're doing. But I believe at the end of the day, Trump will come out on top of this. And he did come out on top of this for right now. But he will at the end of the day. And it just depends, what are we going to have to go through to get there? Because here's the reality. These other countries rely on the American market to sell their goods. You look at Mexico. 85% of their exports come to the United States. China, like 16, 17, 18% of their exports come to the United States. Canada, 80% of their exports come to the United States. Germany, 10% come to the United States. It's like we have huge trading partners that we can make deals with. Huge trading partners. You look at Vietnam, they export roughly a third of all their exports to the United States. South Korea, about 1 in 5 of their exports come to the United States. The UK, 12, 13, 14% of their exports come to the United States. We have a lot of trading partners that need our market. They need our market to bring their goods. And now you can say vice versa, that Americans want those goods too, but also I think they need it more than we need it. But Trump has taken a completely different approach when it comes to China. 100% different approach when it comes to what he wants to do with China. In his statement, he said that he's going to be increasing the tariff on China to 125%. This was because China decided to not retaliate and put tariffs, because they decided to retaliate and put tariffs on the United States. It is going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. Will China throw back? Are they going to put more tariffs on us? What are the implications that you could see come from this? There's a lot of global supply chains that we rely on China for, which I think Trump is very right in what he's doing to try and reshore a lot of these supply chains, critical supply chains that are essential to the American economy that we do not have autonomy over. We don't have agency over. We are reliant on China for it. China imports roughly $250 billion into the United States. And there's a lot of it that is critical to what we do here. You look at electronics. China assembles phones, laptops, TVs. In 2023, I believe it was somewhere in the ballpark of 70 to 80% of U.S. smartphones were imported and came from China. And around 50 or 60% of computers came from China. You want to talk about semiconductors. Even outside of Taiwan, China still processes about 15 to 20% of the global chips. You look at consumer goods, furniture, toys. Now, granted, not as, what would you say? Not as, there isn't as much of it. I don't want to say demand because that's not the right word, but it's not a critical supply chain. I believe that's something that we could, consumer goods, that is definitely something we could pick up from another country. But look at pharmaceuticals. China, they control 80% of the active pharmaceutical ingredients for generic products like antibiotics, painkillers. But the raw materials that go into this, the raw pharmaceutical ingredients that go into this, we are reliant on China for that. You look at machinery and auto parts, industrial gear, car components. You look at wiring and brakes. You're seeing probably a quarter of the market all traces back to China. You want to talk about rare earths. China controls 80% of the rare earths. As far as processing, they do all the processing. In the United States, we have one mine in California, which then we ship the majority of it over to China for them to process it because we don't have the ability to process it, and there's so many regulations in place. So that's why you need to deregulate. You need to have a proper incentive structure in place. You need to have low corporate taxes for these businesses. You need to, at the same time, deregulate so it doesn't take 10 or 15 years to build a mine, to build out one of these rare earth element processing facilities. That is going to be the big thing. If Trump really wants to shift domestic production, we need to cut the fat in the government. We need to cut it. We need to restructure a lot of our entitlement programs. Plus, we then need to heavily invest in these critical supply chains that are absolutely necessary for American independence, economic independence, all of the above. So that's my take on everything today. That's going to wrap things up for today. Drop down below, hit that subscribe button, and we will catch you next time.